If you have seen the meme going around where it has the icebergs that are sticking out of the water, and you can see how much of that iceberg we actually see, it's a really small fraction of the total glacier.
Yeah.
When you go underneath the surface, you can see the magnitude of what is actually happening there. And so today we are going to be talking about how we are walking around as icebergs ourselves, and people are only seeing a fraction of what we're putting forth, and we care so much about such a small percentage of what's our makeup, what we actually are, when there's so much underneath the surface. That's our foundation. It's the big part that actually holds us up that we need to be paying more attention to and tuning into. So welcome to the Connection Codes. This is the podcast where we break open those emotions that are taking us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tiara Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis Hill. And together, they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. And we're so glad you're here.
Hello, world.
Hi, friends. This is such an interesting topic, and it actually came about through a conversation that we were having with some good friends. And he was just sharing they're fairly new to the Connection Codes, but have just immersed themselves in it, which has been so beautiful to walk through this journey with them. And some of the conversations that we had at first, like he would say, and she would agree, that he hadn't cried in 3 years. Like, just not really, there's no tears about much of anything. No tears. And so we've gone pretty deep with them, and it's been beautiful. And he was just sharing last week this idea that he came to in just such a moment, right? Such a really reflective, deep moment for him where he realized, I've only cared about the top part of me, which that's when he talked about the iceberg. And he realized, wow, for my whole life, I've only cared about what people thought of me, of just, he's brilliant and very successful in pretty much everything he touches. Yeah. And it goes back, though, to that whole, this is what's expected of me. So there's tons of pressure, right? When we live only in that 10%, there is so much pressure, because then it's how I look matters, what I drive matters, what I wear matters, where I live matters, how I do in business matters, how much success I have matters, how he's very generous. And a lot of that even comes from what people think of me.
Yeah.
And as you can even imagine, for her, there's so many layers of that are pretty painful. Like, generosity is great, but she'll be like, babe, you don't have to pick up the tab for the 15 people that are at dinner right now.
Right.
But there's a pretty much like, it's all that 10%.
Yeah.
And so now that he's digging deeper and going below that surface, so much is coming out.
Yeah.
And we just got to witness a beautiful moment where I was talking about how much he deserves to be loved, and he just began to weep. And it was so beautiful to see the tears. But it's like, when we go deep, and that's what I love about the Connection Codes, because it's the tools that allows us to tune in and go, what is happening with me below the surface?
Yeah.
Right.
That's so big.
Yeah, and when you said that, and as he began to weep, he said, I don't believe that. And it was amazing. He just leaned into her, and she held him. And he has believed most of his life. Of course, we're not born that way, but very quickly he learned that the 10% is what mattered. You have to present well. All that matters is how people see you. All that matters is what people observe of you. So he has spent certainly his entire adult life trying to look right, trying to look good to everybody, to his wife. And I'm not blaming his wife at all, but that's just the way he presented. So she didn't get to know the depth of him at all. And she's just observing, which he looks amazing. I mean, there's so many fabulous qualities about him. And the problem in our culture is that works. He's so successful. Anybody that look at him would be like, man, he's great. He's awesome. And not realizing that, that's only the top 10% that I'm seeing. I'm missing the the vast majority of who he is and how he is and what's happening with him.
Well, and it's a really, really lonely place to live.
100. That's what I was thinking. Yes.
Oh my goodness. And I mean, we're talking about one individual, but I'm like, oh, how many of us can go, oh, that's me. Yep. That's where I spend so much of my time.
Right.
And it is so fascinating. Glenn and I just attended here in Nashville, AACC. So it's a big, I think there were 7,000 people in attendance. It's for counselors. And I happened to go to one class that was on loneliness. And I was like, well, this is great. You know, we talk a lot about loneliness. And Connection goes, well, it was several professors from a university who are doing this big study on loneliness. So they went through all their stats. I was struggling because it was, I was having a hard time staying awake. And the conclusion of the whole class was, can I just tell you?
Yeah, tell me.
Okay. College students on college campuses are lonely.
Which was a shocker to everyone involved.
And I'm just like...
That's the problem with academics is like,
wow.
Okay, and?
Yeah.
Wow. And I'm like, is anyone in this room actually now shocked at that information?
Right.
And there were some things I thought was interesting. First-year students showed higher loneliness than second-year students, and yet first-year students have so many more activities where they want first-year students to make friends and to get to know other people, so they do all these things. So they were very shocked in the finding that second-year students were less lonely, and then one of the professors said, well, we need to dig a little deeper into this, but we actually think that all those students just don't come back. And so it seems like second-year students are not as lonely.
That's good research.
But it's because all of those students just didn't bother coming back.
Right.
We talk about loneliness a lot, and it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And the other thing that was sad to me about this is that with their research, all they're doing is connecting it to, if you're just around enough people, you won't be lonely. Yeah. And yet we know that's not true.
Right.
We can be in a room full of people and be very lonely in those settings.
And sometimes for some people, that's the loneliest place that you can be.
Yes.
You know, because then you're battling shame, rejection, fear, and then you're flooded. And so then you isolate yourself even in the room full of people, which then just pours more gas on the loneliness. And so it really is this vicious cycle. And especially if we are living under the assumption that we can only reveal the top 10% of us. If that bottom 90% doesn't feel secure and safe and solid, or we don't have a safe person that we can reveal that to, then it just piles on more and more. And then we want to hide. We just raise the water, which I would relate to raising distance between us and others. We just continue to raise it to where you may reach a point where you're only willing to show a little peek, just a little ounce of yourself. And in extreme cases, there are people that just completely hide. They literally shut themselves in their homes and they don't come out because even that little peek is too much to reveal to someone else. And so what do we think is the underlying surface of like, why do people feel like it's only safe enough to show the 10%?
Well, I wanted to add as well that was what we've certainly experienced and what we hear from so many people, that their loneliest experiences on Sunday mornings. When they're at church, and the pastor, whoever, is up there saying, this is your family, this is your home, this is your community. And so you're supposed to smile and say, what was that phrase a few years ago? Hey, brother, how you doing? Blessed and highly favored. How are you? Oh, blessed and highly favored. And then that's it. And somehow we thought that was connection. Somehow we thought that was community. And so actually, that's for many, 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 many people, and I would suggest the majority of people, church attendance is the most painful, the most lonely experience of their week, and that's when they're the most hidden.
Yeah, and I would say that I actually struggle in church on Sundays because I know I'm only seeing 10%. And so for me, with my person, for anyone that's listening that's into the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 3. So authenticity is a core value for me. And so when I step in church, I struggle with my own inner dialogue of, oh man, these people are faking real good right now. And it's like really, really hard for me to know that I'm only seeing that snippet of a person that cleaned themselves up really, really nice to show up. Like it's so painful for me in that aspect because I desperately want the 90%. I desperately want realness, especially in that setting where we're supposed to come and be authentic and be real and be safe, but we're not.
Yeah, and to further muddy the water, for many, many years with so many different pastors, one of the first things they establish when we sit in our very first session is they say, now, this is completely, what is it we call it?
Confidential.
Confidential. And they want to make sure that because it's so crucial that nobody knows that they're coming to see a marriage therapist.
Yeah.
So, and of course, I assure them, yes, I'm under a code of ethics, et cetera, et cetera. Then over the next 20 minutes, they talk about one of their biggest pain points is they don't know how to get their people to be authentic. They don't know how to get people to reveal themselves authentically. And I just tell them, I'm like, well, you're doing a great job of discipling your people because they're imitating you. Because if I understood you right when we first sat down, you said nobody knows about this. Nobody knows what's happening in my marriage. Nobody knows what's happening in my life. And I want to make sure we keep it that way. You are under a code of ethics, right? So, and they're just stunned by that. It's like, no. I want my people to be authentic. Well, but you're modeling for them. And I get it. I'm not even saying I know the solution because if they were authentic, they'd probably be fired on Monday. So it's a flawed system. It's really, really broken.
100%.
But the leaders are actually training their people in how to be inauthentic. And that cycle has continued for a very, very long time. That's not a new development. So back to your question. Can you ask it again?
Yeah. And so how did we get to this point?
How did we get here?
What do you see in sessions that is a leading cause of people feeling like they need to hide the majority of themselves from others?
I would suggest for centuries we have been, and not just the United States, but so many cultures were so condemning. If anybody doesn't fit our norm, if anybody doesn't look a certain way, and in reality, maybe close to 0% of people actually look exactly like that, but you can't, there's a degrees of variation that you can't get too far from what's acceptable. And if you get too far from that, then you're condemned. And if you reveal, and again, this is centuries old, it's not new, but if you reveal that, oh, well, I struggle with this, whatever it is, it's, drug usage, alcohol, fighting with my wife, I mean, there's a long, long list, then there's a tremendous amount of judgment in that from most groups that I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
And then you're either viewed differently or ostracized. And it doesn't take that happening too many times before somebody gets the message, oh, well, then I just won't reveal that anymore. I won't. Right. And that's such a big protocol of the connection goes, the power of the ooh. When somebody shares something with you, I don't care what they share. I literally don't care if they shared they killed their mother. And I'm not in favor of killing your mother. But literally in that moment to go, oh, wow, okay. So help me get that. What happened for you there? And to invite them into their own experience, which I'm using an extreme example, although there are people that has happened for. I've sat with a number of murderers in my life. And to be able to be present with them, which is not always easy. I'm old. I've been doing this a long time. I'm rarely ever shocked anymore. But I remember early on that I would be startled. But if I react to them like they're broken and freaks and messed up and damaged goods, then they're not going to share with me anymore.
I do feel like we need to clarify, though, that if someone tells you that they killed someone, you ooh them. Yeah. You don't look at them like they have three heads, but then you do reach out for a plea assistance. Yes. I feel like we need to clarify that.
Well, although I will say all the murderers I've sat with have already been incarcerated.
Yes.
So this is after the fact.
Well, just in case there's someone listening.
Yeah, okay, yes. Absolutely.
We're not telling you
we're protecting ourselves
to hide. Yeah, we have to protect ourselves.
Right. Yep.
We're not telling you to hide any criminal activities.
Yep.
That's not the point.
Yep.
But the point is to not immediately cast judgment on someone when they're sharing something, especially something that's raw and authentic.
Yeah. This really comes into play with affairs and things of that nature. And I sat with a couple yesterday, and she had an affair and has been ostracized by, she couldn't count the number of people. Her parents won't speak to her anymore. She's been thrown out of her church. And again, I'm not agreeing with her behavior, and I made that abundantly clear to both of them, but she's just not going to share anymore. And so now the 10% will become 6%, and as you said, perhaps completely submerged. I think I cut you off.
No, I was actually cutting you off. But back to your original question. Can you ask it again? Because then I'm going to answer it.
Yes. The question is, especially sitting in sessions, you've heard these stories, you're seeing people tell you things for the very first time that they've hidden. What do we feel like, or what have you experienced a big underlying issue is? Why are people feeling like they can only share the top 10% of themselves?
I was thinking of this while he was answering, and I think, oh my word, for me, it goes back to my childhood. I learned at a really young age what was acceptable to share.
Yeah.
I think we're all different in maybe our experience, but if you had parents or if you lived in a home with parents, like what was acceptable and what was not. And in some ways, based on the punishment, you figure it out pretty quickly. Okay, if I share that, I might get a whooping. Even things like, and I didn't actually have this experience, which is kind of shocking, but I've heard people say, yeah, the first time I used a cuss word, they washed my mouth out with soap. Well, then you learn very quickly, well, I'm sure not going to cuss around them because that's going to be my consequence. So that's not an acceptable thing. And it kind of goes on and on. Like we do start making judgments really young. I grew up in Germany. Well, in Germany, drinking beer, you begin that at a really young age. And so it was very common. And then the Lord's Supper was communion. It was always wine.
Yeah.
And then we moved to the States, and my dad was the pastor, like he was the missionary in Germany. Then we come back to the States, and then he's a pastor here, and the rules all change really quick. As a kid, I was going into 5th grade. It was almost like my head would flip. Like I can visualize it right now. I'd be like, say what? It wasn't a sin last week, and now that we live here, it is. It was just like, get this really quick. Learn this really quick. Now all of a sudden, beer is considered alcohol, and it's a sin. And then communion became grape juice, which I loved, actually. I thought it tasted amazing. I was the kid who went around and finished off all the little grape juice things because my dad was the pastor, so I could do that. After church was over, I'll clean that up and I would drink it all because it was good. I didn't like the wine so much. But it was like, oh my word. As a kid, it became so evident, the judgment. Here's the set of rules that are the judgment. And I did find it, maybe it was because it was so shocking to me that I really saw it then. I saw it in so many things, like what modesty was called over here in the States versus modesty in Germany.
Yeah.
Oh my word. Nudity was so common over there.
Right.
The word modesty, I don't think it was even a word until I moved to the States.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, wow. And so then we had all this stuff about modesty, and then even the shame piece that comes in of like, girls, if you wear anything that could possibly cause a brother to stumble, then it's your fault. So there's such shaming came in, and I became so aware of all of that all of a sudden. Living in Germany, growing up there, that never was a thing as far as that it was the girl's fault based on what she wore, right? And so that was a new one. And then it's like it went on and on for me. And I did find it fascinating. And I think even meeting you at a young age, I feel like we would have conversations about this. Like it was preached on endlessly how wrong adultery was.
Yeah.
But the gluttony of food was never touched.
Yeah.
And I was always so confused by that. I was like, wait, are there different levels of sin? Are there different degrees? Are there ones that are not so bad and others that are bad? And then it was the conversation, well, the consequences, what it leads to. And I was like, gluttony of food can lead to a lot of major problems in life too, but we don't talk about that. So there was so much confusion for me, but I learned the rules.
Yeah.
Believe me, I looked really good as far as I followed the rules. I was a rule follower. So the living in that 10%, I made sense to me.
Yeah.
Got really good. You play by these rules. You do not, the 90%, the iceberg, the underneath part, oh, no. Don't ever reveal yourself.
So talk about the firecracker incident, because I think that's so representative. And in the moment, of course, you don't realize that this is setting me up basically to never share, because that's pretty darn extreme. Do you know how old you were? Any guess?
I would guess that I was probably 5, maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. The story Glenn's talking about is, and again, I think I've already kind of alluded to that I learned pretty quickly what was acceptable. And my dad had an interesting disciplinarian concept. I was the youngest of 8, but I grew up with my 4 brothers. And if something happened during the day and mom told him when he got home, well, instead of finding out what the details were or what happened, he would just line all of us up and whip us. And I just have memories of that. And I have memories of my brothers trying to encourage me to stand still, because they said, if you don't stand still, that then dad will just hit whatever part of my body is running or squirming or whatever. So I have memories of that. And so the kind of my brothers taught me is basically don't ever tell anything, right? Because if you tell anything, we're going to all get a whipping.
Right.
And so the story that Glenn's talking about is we had firecrackers, and one of my brothers said, here, hold it while I light it. So I held it and he lit it. Well, none of them thought to say I was supposed to throw it. So I just held it. And so then he lit it, and then it just went off. And of course, horribly burned 2 of my thumb and my finger.
Yeah.
And immediately they were all like, oh, don't tell. You can't tell. Well, of course, that made sense to me, because I knew if I told, well, I would get a whipping too.
Yeah.
We would all get one, because we weren't supposed to be playing with matches or with firecrackers or whatever.
And you were already hurt, so I get hurt worse.
Right. And so I don't even know. You've asked me that even more recently. How in the world did you hide your fingers? I don't know if to what extent they were damaged.
Right.
But it was like, I learned at a young age
To hide.
to hide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you take that in to all aspects of your life. Like, just so crazy to me what happens when you learn at a young age to hide.
Right.
Because then there's other situations where, like, I would be sexually assaulted and I would hide it.
Yeah.
Because of course I'm not going to tell anyone, because I don't need a whipping over this. Yeah. Somehow it's going to be my fault too.
Yeah. I get that.
And so it just went into so many areas of my life where things happened where I felt uncomfortable in those situations, but I for sure wasn't going to tell anyone. I for sure wasn't going to talk about it. And then those are lots of memories that I have actually in Germany before moving over here. And then over here, I learned so quickly that there was so much judgment that I was like, well, shoot, I'm just so much better staying in that 10% and looking really good all the time.
That's exactly right. A lot of our root is that we have been conditioned, we have been taught to not share, to hide. Yeah. And that stems from our childhood homes for many of us. And then early years at school, feeling shame or judgment from other kids that we just hide pieces of ourselves that we feel are different or unacceptable, even if in our own bodies they feel normal, but to other people it feels unacceptable. And that's something that now as an adult, I have started unpacking even within my own marriage. And we've been married for 15 years and we're like still discovering things about each other and about ourselves. And so there is something just in the last 3 years, I've grown up, I never paid attention to men of the opposite sex. Just like, oh, whatever, it's a guy. And then about 3 years ago, I was somewhere and I was like, oh, that guy's hot. I think that guy's attractive. And I'd never felt that way before, genuinely. But I'm like a married woman. And so I was like, what do I do with this information? And so of course, I'm not going to tell Wes that I think another guy is attractive. So I just hide it down in there. What tended to happen after that was suddenly it's like men were just coming outside for the first time. I don't know where they've been. I don't know if they've just been hiding somewhere. And I was like, well, that guy's attractive. Well, this guy's attractive. Yeah. And finally I reached the point of, do I tell my husband this? And we've had struggles in our marriage in other ways. And I thought, at what point do I wish Wes had come to me when he was struggling with something? And so I thought, okay, I need to just tell him, one, I'm not doing anything wrong. So why does this feel so wrong? And two, I feel like the more I'm keeping it from him, the more it's growing. And so I did. I just like told Wes, hey, bud, I think we probably did the core emotion wheel, or like I shared it from the core emotion of just, I'm having these feelings for the first time. It has nothing to do with you. Like, you're my man. I don't want to be with anyone but you, but I'm having these thoughts, and I'm starting to notice this in myself. And it genuinely felt like almost immediately that feeling dissipated tremendously. Like, it was shocking. But so if I had just continued to let it fester inside of my body, it would have grown and grown and grown. And so I think that when we have that 90% underneath us, that we feel like we can't share, those parts of us, they're going to continue to grow, and they will eventually evolve into something else, or they will come out in a way that is so much more painful. Sorry, I felt like you were.
Well, and I mean, this will be really controversial for some people, but you said you weren't doing anything wrong, which is absolutely true. It almost has nothing to do with you. If you see a beautiful sunset and you get hit with joy, and you're just like, oh my gosh, and we have amazing sunsets that we see from our front porch. Well, Phyllis isn't really responsible that she is experiencing joy seeing the sunset. I mean, how in the world could I possibly criticize her and say, babe, that's so wrong that you think that's gorgeous? Well, it is. It's just a joy experience, and it would be absurd for me to criticize her and tell her she needs to stop enjoying that sunset, stop thinking that that's gorgeous. It is. So you're seeing this guy, and it's a joy experience. You're just like, whoa, he's really, really cute. He's hot. Wow. Okay. And I would rather you process that through instantly in the moment. And what we've done for people is we've told them, no. The fact that you can recognize that sunset is gorgeous, you are wrong and you are bad. But the exact same thing is true for a car, a house. It has nothing to do that I want to move into that house or steal that person's car. No, it's just a really cool looking car. It just is.
Yeah.
And you can tell Glenn all day long, stop thinking that car is gorgeous. And I'm not really a car person, but regardless. But it is. It's a beautiful car. It's metallic red and it looks great. So it's a joy experience. I'm looked at it, I'm like, oh, babe, look at that car. Well, the exact same thing is true with what you're describing. You're not, again, certainly not doing anything wrong, but you're not even trying.
Yeah.
Now, if you follow the dude around for 45 minutes and then get his phone number and then set up a coffee with him, that's a whole different thing. That's your actions. That's your behavior.
Yeah.
But the experience, so that's stunning. And I wish everybody could get that. For you just tell Wes, this felt a little bit odd. And I think I may feel a bit of guilt in it, but I felt a lot of joy seeing that guy. He was really, really cute.
Well, and I will say that it was difficult for Wes to hear that. It was not an easy conversation for him. And it did spark some insecurity in him, which I'm willing to process with him and I'm willing to continue processing with him. Yep. But I also know from just my own experience in that short amount of time that if I don't share it, damage is done. Then it will grow and it will become worse. And y'all were actually the first people that we ever admitted this to. You may not remember it. We were in Florence and you were over, and I don't remember if Wes said or if I did, but it was just kind of like, yeah, Tira's been finding other people attractive. And I remember you telling us that, just like, yeah, that's just a spark of joy. And you process it and you move on from it. Yeah. And that was so freeing in that moment, for it not to be, you're a bad person or you're a horrible wife or anything like that. Yeah. And so I think that for people, what we have underneath that surface that's growing that we may have shame or guilt in, if we would process it from the moment that it begins to happen, whatever that is, it helps raise more to the surface where you're not even growing anything underneath. You're not even stuffing things down that you feel like you should hide from other people. Because now I don't feel like I need to hide anything from Wes because I told him so quickly. It wasn't something that took a year, 2 years, and got bigger and bigger and bigger. Amazing. And so in this moment, if there was something that was like 2 years that I needed to share it now, so I'm not waiting 10 years to do it.
Yeah.
The sooner that you are able to connect with a safe person, whether it's your spouse or your best friend or your parent, the more freedom you have underneath the surface.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you're saying that. I think about, like, we are conditioned in so many things, and we are afraid of judgment. And that fear, it does so often keep us under the surface, right? Because it's like, well, if I share this with you and you tell me that I'm wrong, then I have to deal with all of that, right?
Yeah.
And
the shame on top of it.
yeah. But also, like, for example, in that conversation, if you had that conversation with Glenn and I, and our response had been, oh, well, girl, you better be careful.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're going down a slippery slope and you need to really just repent of that and you need to stop. Then you would all of a sudden become this like paranoid, like, oh my gosh, what's happening with me? And then you could start questioning everything of your belief system or what's happening in my life that got me here. Instead, we actually empowered you
Yeah.
to stay really honest with the most important person on the planet as far as your spouse.
Right.
So you're like, okay, I can just be honest with him. It may cause him some pain, but then he'll just share that with me.
Yep.
And then we can process that. Yeah. And that's just so powerful.
Yeah.
And so beautiful.
Yeah, and if he feels fear that, I feel fear that means you're going to leave me tomorrow, then he processes through that fear. If he feels shame that, so I feel like I'm less than, I feel like I'm less valuable than this other person. But it's such a silly notion. And I remember growing up, this will be offensive for a few people, but I remember growing up and I would hear the preacher say, my wife's the most beautiful woman in the world. And then I would meet his wife and I'd go, well, do you not know many people? I wouldn't say those things, but I was always starting them talking about when I'm 8 years old. I'm just like, wait, what? I heard you announce to the congregation that your wife's the most beautiful woman in the world, but I just met her and she's not. So I don't understand what's happening here. And again, in a little kid's mind, I'm like, what? This doesn't make sense. And it's a silly notion for me to say, and vice versa, I'll just use myself, for me to say to Phyllis, I must be the most attractive man to you on the planet. I could enter every, I don't know what male beauty competitions are called. I could enter everyone on the planet this year. I wouldn't win any of them. I wouldn't even be in the top 10, 50, whatever. So it's a silly notion for me to say to anybody, but to say to Phyllis, you need to see me as the most attractive man on the planet. First of all, I'm 61, almost 62. Tomorrow, by the way. But now we just dated the podcast.
That's okay.
Oh, darn.
It's not, though, tomorrow.
It's not going to come out.
It's,
2 days from now.
It's 2 days from now, babe. 2 days from now.
That shows you what I know. Anyway, so it's just such a bizarre, I mean, the word attractive just means attract. It attracts. If Shaquille O'Neal walked in the room, I'd be like, whoa, he's huge. And so we've really, really warped this and distorted it. And it's a silly notion to say to Tira, Wes must be at least the most attractive man in the world to you, or preferably he's the only attractive man. That doesn't make sense. It's just a silly idea.
Well, I want to go back to just the idea or the thing that we fear judgment.
Yeah.
And that is not because we decided to. Like, that, for many of us, came from
Real
years
experience,
of conditioning and hurtful experiences. Kind of going back to your question, what happens to people that they don't reveal themselves? Well, many people have a long list of memories from early on in life. Like, well, one time I shared that and I was open with my struggle and I lost my job over it.
Right.
Or, I lost my friends over it, or, my parents don't speak to me anymore. I mean, there's so many stories that are people's stories.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why they live as 90%, they don't reveal themselves. They're just in this 10%. But that is super lonely. And that is not what we are designed to do.
Right.
So often we go, okay, now y'all have kind of discussed the problem. So yes, we can all admit we're in that 10%. So now what? What do we do to actually go deeper within ourselves? Yeah. And we talk about this a lot as far as you got to have safe people in your life. And the conversation that we were having with someone recently where they were talking about because of the struggle that they've gone through in their marriage, and they were like, do we tell people? Well, the loneliness of not telling is just about to kill them, right? So the conversation is, you got to have people in your life that can walk this journey with you, that you can be safe with.
Right.
But what's sad, it's usually when we go through a crisis that we realize, I don't know if these people are safe. I don't know if I can reveal myself and it be okay.
Yeah.
And that is tough.
Yeah.
But you got to start that journey. You got to actually go there so that, or you won't know.
Yeah.
You got to go there and find out. And do you risk a lot? Absolutely. And we've walked through many people through that journey of actually realizing, I need a whole new friend group. I mean, I can't even give a number of how many conversations we've had with people where we say, you need a new friend group. You need to move, maybe because you are feeling so much judgment. We were talking to a young couple. They have only been married a year, and they feel so much judgment. The loneliness just about chokes you.
Yeah.
Like you can barely breathe. You feel so lonely because you're not revealing yourself. You're not, and you want that. We are made to want that.
Yeah.
If you're listening and you're going, okay, I get it. I'm in that 10%. So what in the world do I do? Well, you slowly begin revealing yourself. And then you find out really quickly. And you got to do it with the core emotion.
Yeah.
And that is the thing. If people can't even hear your core emotions about anything, I'm not saying you open the door to all the things they're going to blast you over. It's more can we be authentic? I feel some fear about being authentic in this group. I feel very lonely. And depending on their reaction, you will know whether you're in a safe place or not.
Yeah, and you don't need to tell everybody, but you need to tell somebody. And
Yes.
a mentor told me that many years ago, and I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I tend to tell everybody, and Phyllis sometimes has to monitor me in that. But what I have learned is you find out real quickly who's safe and who's not. And it was only somewhere 12 to 15 years ago that Phyllis said, babe, why do you pursue relationships with people who don't want a relationship with you? And I was aghast at this horrible thing that she had said. And then my adult children got involved in the conversation and said, yeah, Dad, that's what you've always done. You expend all of your time and energy with people who are never going to be kind to you. And that revolutionized my life. I'm startled that, and it just didn't occur to me. And I was in my late 40s at that point. But to now realize, oh, you're supposed to hang out with people who are kind to you. And they may recognize that you're weird or odd, which is what happens for me, but they're kind to me. And it's unbelievable, the energy in that.
And you're saying the word kind, but they're safe for you.
Yeah.
They're safe. So kind and safe together there. And I do know that during this season of our life, we both really believed that it was biblical, that you stayed in groups that were unkind to you. As in, we were, and of course they were all Christians. Like we were in faith-based communities where people were just really unkind.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, no, what would Jesus do? He'd stay right here and just keep turning the other cheek. And we really believed that.
Yeah.
And so it was almost like, no, this is what life is about. Just like for some of us, we're in family units. We have siblings or parents that are super judgmental and super unkind and really not safe at all. But we're like, well, too bad. They're our family, so we're just going to stay in that.
Yeah.
We're going to just take it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no.
Yeah.
No. And we need to be around people that are safe. It doesn't mean that we stop being kind to them or we stop even being around them. It's just those are not your safe people. You got to find those safe people.
And as I always give the caveat, you're not allowed to go key their car or burn their house down, but move away from those people. And I should also mention that, since we talked about the whole Jesus part of it, is that Jesus actually said the opposite. Jesus said, if people aren't unkind to you, not only exit, when you get to the edge of the town, dust off, shake the dust out of your robes. And Jesus knew you couldn't get every speck of dust out. That's not the point. It's a symbolic, I'm not going to be around you anymore. And I'm not going to go key your car. I'm not going to burn your house down. But I'm just not going to be around you. And even what Phyllis mentioned, Jesus said, if someone slaps you on the cheek, turn the other one. What Jesus didn't say is go find them the next day so they can slap you
Again. Yeah.
And that's what I always did. Because I thought, oh, look how godly I am. Well, no, that's called stupid, actually. It's not godly at all. And I would pursue that relationship kind of knowing that this person's going to treat me like crap.
Yeah.
And again, I don't wish that person ill, but I'm just not going to be around them.
Well, and I feel a lot of guilt about that because I have memories of even encouraging our children to stay around teenagers that were unkind to them because it's like, well, you could be Jesus to them.
Serving them.
So the fact they bully you, you just be the bigger, the stronger. And this was like, again, not out in the street. This was in church settings. And we'd be like, no, you need to have them over and love them more. And now I feel like, wow, what kind of damage do we do even in that to encourage our kids to not find safe people, but to spend time more with the ones that were unkind because maybe your kindness can rub off on them. That was kind of the mindset. And there can be a lot of damage done to kids when parents are really pushing that.
Totally.
So.
Okay, so before we move into the core emotion, I want to do some like key takeaways from today. And what I have gotten out of this for sure is that when we are only sharing the pretty parts of us, the cleaned up, the nice snow peak at the top, then that's actually a place of a lot of loneliness because we're not showing up as our full selves. We feel like we have to hide things. And we talk a lot about loneliness on this podcast. And a huge part of that, studies have shown that loneliness is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes every single day if you are living in loneliness.
Wow.
So that is such a damaging position to have on life. And on top of that, the things that you are hiding, if you continue to just stuff them down and hide them, you can create deep damage in your body, in your relationships long term, because you are allowing these things to fester and create a lot of extra emotion, more shame, more guilt, more fear, because you're not sharing with that safe person. And sometimes I'll watch a movie and it's like the guy is trying not to drink alcohol anymore. And then he ends up at the bar and gets the drink. And I'm like, oh, if you would just go home and tell her now, hey, I had one drink tonight. That would save you so much than continuing every single day. So as soon as you feel that guilt or that joy or whatever it is, share it with your partner because it will allow it to not grow and be hidden. And then the last thing that I am really taking away from this as well is that I want this community to be different. Connection coders, this is one thing I actually said it this weekend to friends. One of the things I don't like about the connection codes is that you know better now. And when you know better and you choose not to do better, that's on you at this point.
Wow.
And so I would like for you to decide, am I going to be a safe place for people? Can people come to me and share those hidden parts with me and me look at them and ooh them through those moments? Can I not take it online and be a troll on the internet when there's someone that I disagree with politically or demographically, what their sexuality is or their body image? Are you going to be someone who creates safety and not judgment for others? And so I would love for this community to represent that.
And I just have to interject because I think that's the power of the ooh. Just to be able to ooh the person, be present with them, hear whatever's happening for them, and realizing that something led to their poor choice. Something led to their poor behavior. I'm not condoning the poor choice, not saying I'm not putting a check mark by it, but to find out what happened. And I've done that literally with murderers. Say, so help me get that. What happened for you that led you there? I'm not agreeing for them killing someone, but I want to find out what happened for them that led them to that disastrous scenario.
Because then it's at that point you can actually help them.
Right. Which helps them not to repeat that action next time.
Yes.
Where instead of just going, well, that's wrong, that was wrong. Well, they already know it's wrong. Really? There's no big surprise. Like, wait, what? Killing people is not a benefit? They already know that. But if we're not helping them, and that's true with any behavior, that's true with affairs, that's true with overeating, that's true with any detrimental behavior, because we all want to be successful. Nobody's wanting to live in disaster and defeat. So let's figure out what's happening that's leading to the detrimental behavior that leads to the disaster and the defeat.
Yeah. Okay, so now we are going to move into our core emotion wheel, and this is the 4-minute tool that Dr. Glenn and Phyllis have created that will help you actually identify what's happening. Right. So you can actually discover, oh, I'm feeling guilt about this, so I don't want to share it. That's so bizarre. Sorry. Why are you honking? That's bizarre. Sorry. So it can actually help you identify when there is shame firing inside of your body that typically you'd say, oh, that's shame. I don't want to share that with anyone. But now you can actually give yourself freedom to be a full human with that safe person. Yeah. Okay, so y'all going to share?
Well, why don't we do it?
Oh, I would love to do it.
That'd be fun.
Yep.
You want me to go first?
Sure.
All right. Well, especially even in view of this conversation today, I feel anger towards just what I picked up early in life, right? Yeah. I feel anger that I learned at a really young age to shut down. Yeah. Let's see, my guilt, I shared it a minute ago. I feel guilt that I passed that on to my kids when they were teenagers, that I really encouraged them to be around bullies because I thought their goodness and their kindness could rub off on them. Let's see, shame, I feel shame, most recent shame. Well, I think I felt it earlier this morning because we had a meeting and I didn't have all the names written down that I really needed to have written down for some follow-up that we need to do. So I'm like, oh, I feel shame in that. Let's see, lonely. I think that Glenn and I went to a huge conference this past weekend, and there were moments when I felt lonely because we opted to go to different classes. And so there was quite a few times that I was like by myself in a class. And I always hate that first sit down feeling of, oh, I don't know anyone. I feel lonely. Tira encouraged me to network. So I had to meet people. So I was like, okay, get out of yourself. But felt lonely multiple times in those scenarios and wondered, why did we do this? Why didn't we go together? We've shared this some more recently that Glenn's mom is not doing great, and just felt it's kind of for me a roller coaster of sad. It just kind of the waves of that comes in pretty strong. Let's see, hurt. I think the most recent hurt, I think there was some family interaction where I definitely feel unappreciated, and there's hurt in that, and just taking care of Glenn's mom, definitely there. Let's see, what do I have left? Fear. Man, it's a crazy fear right now of just the next few days, the next few weeks, and just how to be all that I can be for his mom and caring for her. So definitely fear in that. Joy, we had tons of joy. 3 dear friends came in from Alaska for this conference and stayed with us, and we spent so much time together, and they loved on us so well. It was so beautiful and so encouraging, and so much joy around that as far as how that blessed us in this time.
Yeah, I love that.
Amazing.
Okay, I feel anger. Ooh, when have I felt anger? I don't really feel much anger. Anger moves us to action. I think I feel anger because I am angry really with myself that what am I doing right now that are causing my kids to feel like they need to hide? How am I projecting things onto them? And so I feel anger at myself that I didn't have the connection codes when I first started having kids. So I developed habits over the last decade that now I need to break. I feel shame. Because one, I shared something really vulnerable on the podcast today, and that I do have shame in because people don't share these things very often.
Yeah.
And so my shame is like, how are people going to perceive me? I feel guilt. Because Wes has a really big day today, big meetings, and I was trying to figure out if I could go, that I'm not with him. I feel guilt that I'm not with him.
Oh, yikes.
I feel fear. In sharing with this audience and being vulnerable because I think I'm different than a lot of people listening. And so I feel fear of when they find out certain things about me, the judgment that can come from that. I feel lonely because Wes isn't here today and just so much loneliness when he's not here.
Yeah.
Sad because I had a kid of mine beg me to stay home from school today, and I didn't let them. And so I feel sad for them that they were struggling this morning. I feel hurt by society. I actually started my day watching a video of someone I follow who she was just like, the trolls online for her are so painful.
Wow.
And she's like, she actually was sharing a part of her journey with people. And she's like, I'm not sharing this anymore.
Wow.
And she goes, I know it was helping people, but I can't because the trolls are too much. And she was just weeping. And I'm hurt that we as a society think that we can talk to other people that way. And it was like body shaming for her. So hurt by that. And I have joy because we're here together. And I forgot about this meeting today. And so y'all were just so gracious with me and let me throw on clothes and just your response to me and saying, take as much time as you need. Like, I have so much joy that I work with people that understand that mornings in life can be chaos and we get flooded sometimes. So lots of joy in my work environment today.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Oh my goodness.
Thank you all so much. And for our listeners, man, I just really want to encourage you that whatever it is you're hiding, that you will find a safe person that you can share a bit about that to and encourage you to then be that safe person for someone else. And we are so, so grateful to you for showing up here every week. And you're obviously someone who is wanting to grow. Like, you are someone who is wanting to heal emotionally inside your body and not have these unprocessed emotions. So I just commend you for showing up. It just shows that we can shift society. Like, we can do that. And we know that you play a huge role in that. My ask today, Dr. Glenn said that his birthday is on Wednesday. I'm going to ask that you leave us a review today. Leave us the 5 stars, but write something out down there of how this podcast and what Dr. Glenn and Phyllis have created, how that has impacted you, how that's impacted your life. And just say a thank you to them for giving us this will that we get to use and process with.
And like, beyond just the podcast, if you've ever purchased one of our books, please go on Amazon and leave a review, leave a 5-star review, share a testimonial, even take a picture. It's almost like I've never realized how important it is to leave reviews. And there are times that I'm trying to get better at it. Like when I go to a restaurant that I love, to give them a really positive review, because man, people are really quick to give negative reviews.
Yeah.
And now that I understand what trolls do, they are just out to destroy you. It's not like they had an actual bad experience with you. So yes, that would be an incredible birthday gift for Glenn. If you guys that are listening would jump on, or tell your friends to do it and say, hey, if you've got a friend that doesn't listen to podcasts, but they've read our book, ask them to leave a review, because it really does make a difference.
Yeah, it is super, super helpful. Cool. And I will leave those links in our show notes. And as always, we do this because...
Yes, you need this.
You deserve this. So let's do this.